Are you sauna curious or a sauna convert? Either way, sauna is what we're diving into today with a doctor who decided to go get herself a PhD in sauna. You'll know that if you listen to the show live, every month we have low tox partners that help you with your swaps or stock ups, depending on what you might need right now. Check out the Weleda and Oz Climate offers below. These two are for Aussie residents. Enjoy. Hello, Joy. How are you?
Hello, Alex. I'm great.
We are talking sauna, and I'm going to jump right in and say, as a practitioner, where did sauna come for you? Was it an aha moment? Was it something you kind of always understood? Was it something you knew about growing up from parents? Like, where did the miracle of the use of sauna in health hit for you?
Well, my sauna story was very slow to get steaming up. I grew up in San Diego, California, so not a lot of sauna exposure, and this
Mm,
is in the 1970s, 1980s. And went and traveled the world, studied medicine, and it wasn't until I started working in a posting in Alaska that I kind of got interested in saunas, and it was really for socializing. I was one of
hmm.
the family doctors in a small town, and everyone saunaed, and
Yeah.
especially in the wintertime to just get through the winters, the cold winters. And it was very social. We'd always, big groups of us would get together. Many of us built our own saunas. My husband and I, who's also Aussie husband, we ended up building our own sauna too. And as far as health wise, I have a condition called Raynaud's syndrome.
So does my
And
mother-in-law.
yeah, so for
Mm,
me, it's cold, extreme cold, and stress always
mm.
brings it on. And for those of you who don't know what Raynaud's is, it's this painful kind of spasms of the little blood vessels in your fingers and toes. And it can really cause trouble, especially like skiing. I've gotten frostbite. Oh, it can cause lots of troubles, but it also can be managed. There are different medicines and things and creams you can use, but I never liked using them. It just didn't feel right. And I was afraid when I moved to Alaska. I thought, oh no, my Raynaud's is going to be terrible.
Yeah, not the best posting.
No, and
Right.
I thought, oh, I'm not going to last long there. But kind of the opposite happened. I forgot I had Raynaud's. And ended
Okay.
up lasting 5, 6, almost 7 years there. And then we moved to Alice Springs.
Hmm.
And I was so shocked when my Raynaud's came back again, because I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not that stressed and it's not that cold. What is going on? And again, it didn't really connect until we moved to Melbourne. And both my husband and I, we were missing a sauna, so we decided to build a sauna when we
Hmm.
were living in Northcote. And within 2 weeks of using the sauna, my Raynaud's was gone again. And that's when the light bulb moment went on for me. I went, oh my gosh, I think it's sauna. And I'm a big exerciser, and I'm a big, so
Yeah, so
I
you're
was trying
getting
to,
your circulation happening in other
yeah,
ways, and then yet,
right. And yet sauna. So, and about it, around that same time, I went and attended a conference where Professor Mark Cohen was speaking. And when I heard him mention saunas in kind of a distant, I went, oh my gosh, this is it. This is it. I've got to talk to this man. And I
mm,
pulled him aside and said, I want to study saunas. I can't figure out why we're not using it more. And I think this could be a real treatment that's unexplored. And he agreed. So that's what launched me on doing a PhD on sauna and how it can be used in health and medicine. And that was
so
already, gosh, nearly 10 years ago.
yeah, wow.
Yes.
And congrats on the PhD.
Oh, well, that was a while ago already. But yes, but
Still, it's
I'll
such a
always
huge
accept
body
it.
of work to undertake. So I always think
Yeah.
congratulations are in order. Now, a question I have straight up with you noticing that when you moved to literally one of the coldest places in the world, but sauna started becoming part of your lifestyle. And then I think of all the Nordic cultures, and sauna is such a huge part of their lifestyle and also very cold in those parts.
Mhm.
Um, is there something in the resilience piece of these populations, because they have very good health metrics, a lot of those countries and areas. If you think of Alaskans, they're tough, man. So
Yeah.
like, is it something about that culture that then accidentally brought in a sauna as almost a coping mechanism, and it inadvertently created a health benefit, but like, rather than just let's keep warm during the winter?
Good. I think that's a great question. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure of the answer to that. I
Yeah, I'm
mean,
wondering, like, is this a happy accident that sauna came into
well,
our lives?
it certainly was a happy accident for me. And so that's all I can really say.
Yeah.
And then in doing this journey around talking to people all over the world, as well as, I did a global sauna survey as kind of the first step of my PhD, just to start to ask people, well, why do you get in the sauna, and trying to capture other reasons. I was surprised by the big range of why people sauna. So I think the answer to your question is huge, and
Mm.
it's multi-pronged. I'm not sure that there's one answer to that question.
Mm-hmm.
I think, being in the cold and using heat can kind of make sense in those northern climates, but that's not to say that it isn't as good of a tool here in warm or even tropical climates. So I've now talked to people who live in the tropics and sauna regularly. And there is a history of using sauna in places like Laos, Thailand, which are not these Nordic climates. So I
Mm.
I actually think this is something very fundamental, going towards almost the fire element. I
Mm-hmm.
think it's something in our DNA, but I think it's common in all of our DNAs wherever we come from. So I think we're actually flipping a metabolic switch by
Right.
doing it like that.
Uh-huh. And so, yeah, it almost makes me then think maybe there has been an indigenous element where there was a wisdom around the heat
Oh,
exposure, and we, in through colonialization, we kind of lose those lines of wisdom.
no question of it. No
Mm.
question of it. I mean, here in Australia, certainly indigenous culture, there's a lot of burning of different herbs and things. Same way in North American, in Native American cultures, there's the sweat lodge. There was a
Mm.
lot. And I think this is a good time to segue into, well, what's happening when we get into a sauna? And here
Yes.
I'm talking about all different kinds of saunas, what's actually going on, and then we can tease out what's going on in the different types of saunas. But,
Mm.
mostly when we're getting into the sauna, we're getting, we have sensors all over our skin. Skin's the largest organ of our body. And we're getting these messages that get routed to our hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is also it's a big relay station for hormones, and for it's a big powerhouse of communications. But anyway, the heat gets sensed there. And then we get these messages through our autonomic nervous system. So this is the nervous system we're not thinking about, that we don't tell it, oh yeah, I'm going to move this right arm. No, no. It's the one that monitors the beating of our heart, the breathing of air, the things that we don't want to spend a lot of brain space thinking about, but it's got to happen in the background all the time. Well, that's where the hypothalamus tells our circulation, our heart, to say, hey, let's send blood to the extremities, get it away so that we can increase our chance of sweating. Sweat
Mm.
glands are this amazing primordial thing that not many other mammals, in fact, no other mammal sweats exactly like us. That's our major thermoregulation event, is sweating. Now, you can think of horses, you can think of dogs. Yes, they sweat, but their sweat is not, and they don't sweat to the same degree as us. And their sweat has completely different content than ours.
Mm.
And even,
Really?
yeah, and the research around sweat is just getting started. We spend a lot of time ignoring sweat. But hold on, I'll come back to sweat. Let's stick
Okay.
with
Yes, I
what's
definitely want to
happening.
go back there. Okay, but
Yeah,
what
so what's
happened?
happening when we're in the sauna, we're redirecting all our circulation to our extremities, and then sweating, and your sweat that you produce, which is 99% water-based, but there's a lot of other stuff than just water and salt and a lot of other minerals and hormones and things that are in sweat. And those get evaporated. Now, that's how we cool. That's how we cool ourselves. It's the energy used to evaporate that sweat. And that is what ends up cooling us. And then, but you get all that increased circulation, and you're also drawing away blood from your brain. So that's why it can be kind of calming. It takes that blood flow and puts it to our extremities. And what's interesting though is the different type of saunas promote different amounts of evaporation opportunity. So think of a dry sauna, something like an infrared sauna, or say a more traditional Finnish style sauna before you pour the water on the rocks. That's a really dry. So the humidity's running about less than 10% usually. And so you can really pour out that sweat. That sweat can really evaporate and you can produce more as long as you're well hydrated. And that's another point we'll come back to at some point in our conversation. But anyway, so in a Finnish or infrared sauna, you're able to you can stay in there a long time because you can thermoregulate. That sweating mechanism's happening. Now let's switch gears and go to, say, a steam sauna, or some of these mist saunas where there's high humidity, like over 60, sometimes over 80 to 90% humidity in the air. Guess what? That sweat that you produce can't go anywhere. So it actually limits your sweating and shuts down. And so what's happening inside you, that core temperature is climbing a lot faster than it is in, say, a dry sauna or an infrared sauna. And that's why when you go into a steam sauna, you can't last. Most of us cannot last as long as we can repeated sessions in, say, an infrared or a Finnish style sauna. And that's a big difference that I think a lot of people forget about, that there's a major difference.
And the fact that the core temperature is rising in the more humid steam experience, does that then give us more of an immune boost, where the drier sauna might give us more of a detoxification effect? Like, what's happening between the two there?
Great questions, and it depends is really the answer. But I'd have to say that most of our idea about what's happening in the sauna is, we call it a type of stress, hormetic stress, hormesis, where, when you first start the stress, it's great, and then it's U-shaped. If you overdo the stress, then it can start to not be so beneficial. And I think it's the same way with saunas. So I liken saunas to exercise because a lot of the effects are very similar. And in my last clinical trial, where I looked at women, because that's another theme we'll come back to, is so many of the sauna studies are done on only men. And I do get it. From a science point of view, it's so much easier to study men because they don't have those hormonal fluctuations us women do that are playing with that hypothalamus, going back to that hypothalamus. So most of what we know, I mean, it is changing now. I'd say in the last 5 years, I'm starting to see more and more studies, including some of my own that got published that are focusing on women. But so for the most part, it tends to be more on men, and that's what we need to change, is understanding that better. But I got lost because we were talking about something else, and
that's okay. I threw the curveball of the immune versus detox, and I just think that's a really interesting difference.
Okay, that's what okay, now you reminded me. So what I find, and again, this is general, this is more on anecdotal than what I can prove, is that women tend to reach that U part of the curve a lot quicker than men. So in other words, women, in my experience, have liked a gentler heat. That's not to say that some women don't really love a really, steam sauna or but they usually have to work up to that point or get sauna fit. And again, it's this analogy to exercise. And so my last clinical trial, I compared directly a control where we just a meditating activity with the exercise, indoor bicycling activity, as well as compared to an infrared sauna activity. And I was aiming to get the heart rate and blood pressure changes exactly the same for the bicycling, the exercise, and the sauna interventions. And I found three major differences in these same women. So I used women as their own control. And what I found is infrared sauna increased the core body temperature by a full degree more. And again, that goes with what I was saying, whereas in exercise, you can think that you get rid of that sweat really much quicker, and it's cooling off. It's being more effective. Whereas in a sauna, you're cooling off, but you're still exposed to that kind of unrelenting heat. So that was one finding. A second finding was that these women didn't have to breathe as fast when they were in the sauna. Whereas when you think about when you're moderately exercising, you kind of have to breathe a bit faster. You need that more oxygen. Whereas you're not having an increased oxygen demand when you're going into the infrared sauna. And that's strong, that's potent. I mean, it sounds obvious. It sounds like, well, of course you have to breathe faster when you exercise than going to the sauna. But really, when you exercise, when you breathe faster, you're actually producing more metabolic toxins, something we call reactive oxygenated species. And your body has to work hard to get rid of those too. Versus in a sauna, you're not making all those reactive oxygenated species. So I think that's a huge difference. That's a power difference. So I think a sauna, you can work on the circulation without putting all that stress on your breathing system and respiratory system. And then the third thing I found is that the skin temperatures of those in the sauna stayed higher. So they stayed warmer. It makes sense again. Whereas when you're exercising, you're getting rid of that. So that sweating is working to cool you down, cool your skin down, as well as your core temperature. And between those three things, I think with women, I view, say, a steam sauna or a higher temperature sauna as kind of higher intensity sauna. Or I mean, like analogous to higher intensity exercise, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And it kind of makes me think about women and our spidey senses for looking after the tribe and sensing danger and just being on alert. It would then make sense that we would react more strongly if there was a stress put on the body of some kind.
It could, yes. That is definitely one way to look at it. Another way to look at it too is it depends on where we're at in our cycle. And this is something else that's starting to get teased out in exercise. Like we're starting to see these nice clinical trials showing that women, especially really, competitive athletes, do better at certain parts of their cycle than others. And I don't know if you're familiar with Dr. Mindy Pell's work, but she calls that when you look at the menstrual cycle, that first part of the cycle, when you start your period, and that for the 2 weeks after you start your period, that's the power phase. That's when estrogen levels tend to be a little bit higher. And guess what effect estrogen has through the hypothalamus on our thermoregulation? It drops our blood pressure. And in fact, I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but before the pill was widespread, we used to use temperature monitoring to know when you were ovulating. Because what happens when you ovulate? Your core body temperature goes up a full degree and then stays up for the remaining 2 weeks of the cycle, which is more the rest and restore part of the cycle, that kind of progesterone dominant. It's not that estrogen levels aren't there, but the progesterone is taking over a bit. And you're running higher than your normal. So trying to get into a sauna, I need to test all this out, but this is my theory. I think we can get more out of the sauna when we're premenopausal in that first 2 weeks, like while we're menstruating and then right after. And then when you're going through that premenstrual thing, that's the time that maybe sauna may not be as but this all needs to be explored more
Yeah.
formally.
And definitely that research would be so interesting, because then you could have a look at fasting, exercise, sauna, any kind of stress, and really map out. And then comes the question, so what do we do with the modern world that we are forced to then live in half of our month, a way that goes against everything our nature and biology tells us?
Yes, well, hold on. That's
Mm,
probably only half the population of women now. So as someone who is postmenopausal, I, s-
okay,
I
yes.
think there's a role, and I think, and I actually think in going through the perimenopause to menopause transition, I think that's where sauna could be huge, hugely therapeutic. But again, we're going to need to tease this out and study it more rigorously. But one of the things I noticed when I did this global sauna survey in 2016, 2017, and we got, over almost 700 recipients from all over the world, and half women, half men. That was the first hint to me that women are using the sauna just as much as men, even if they're not getting studied as much, they're
Yes.
using it.
Yeah.
But one of the things I noticed in the anecdotal comments is quite a few of the postmenopausal women said, one of the things I noticed is the sauna was really helpful for keeping away hot flushes.
Hmm.
And that's so what we call in more science terms vasomotor symptoms. I'm actually thinking, wow, this could be a lifestyle tool that could be used in a very therapeutic way for a population that kind of struggles, especially if you are diagnosed with any kind of hormone sensitive condition, say like breast cancer or cervical cancer, where you can't actually explore hormones, which is our major treatment for
Mm.
for perimenopause related symptoms like that. So for that population, I'm wondering if sauna might be the perfect slide in to help a lot of those women that struggle with those symptoms, which is about 80% of women. It's not a
Yeah, it's a
small
huge
amount.
population. It'd be
Um,
so interesting as people listen if you would share, you guys listening right now, if you're in perimenopause, have you started using sauna? Have you noticed after a sauna, you feel like, oh, thank gosh, and then I had a really good sleep that next couple of nights, like it helped me regulate. Tell us, I will share it with Joy.
And what a wonderful comment you just made about sleep. So that's
Mm,
another thing I found in my global sauna survey. So it was 86% of all recipients, men and women, said that they slept well after a sauna. And not just after one night, 2 nights. They noticed the effect after 2 nights. And that was whatever type of sauna they were using.
mhm.
And I should back up and say there are some people that are very that prefer a steam sauna. So they're the ones that they're kind of like the adrenaline junkies. They really want the strong one, or
Yeah,
they're
they want to be
or
hit with it, like
yeah, they
in your
want to be
face kind of
hit.
feeling. Yeah.
And there is definitely so about 20% of people said they preferred a steam sauna over, and that was again men and women preferred. Probably a little more men than women. Like I said, I noticed that the women in most of the clinical trials I've done and in the anecdotal interviews I've done, we tend to be more on that gentler side. More
Hmm.
on we don't I think we're more sensitive. We're like you mentioned. I think our thermal regulation is already more attuned.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And
but okay.
no, no, you go for it, Joy.
Well, you mentioned something earlier too, that in our modern times,
Mm,
and that's one of the reasons I'm thinking that perimenopause, I mean, yes, part of it is we're talking more about women's health in general. So, but when I've talked, I don't remember my grandmother or my great grandmother complaining to me about menopausal symptoms. And I think it's part of our modern world, our comfort crisis, as there's a famous author who's written a whole book about this, that the minute we're in a thermo comfort crisis too. The minute we get cold, what do? We turn on a heater. The minute we get hot, we're turning on an air conditioner or a fan. We have that ability, probably to a degree that we've never had before.
mm.
And as a result, guess what? That poor thermoregulation system is just not getting used very much.
It's
And so
lazy.
it's
Yeah.
lazy. And then when you think about how estrogen, progesterone play such a role in thermoregulation, and then suddenly you're going through perimenopause and affecting a big building block of a mechanism. That's, I think, why, that's my theory into why it could help, is that if you use it all the time, you're developing other pathways that are participating and will help take over as that estrogen level drops. Because really, we've associated hot flushes with when estrogen levels are coming down.
Mm,
But menopause, estrogen levels are coming down, then they're going up, down, up, down.
mm.
And that can go on for about 10 years in perimenopause
Oh
for most
gosh,
of us.
like the most terrifying Google search any 40-something-year-old woman does. How long does this? Whoa, okay. 10 years?
Well, get into a sauna is what I
Get into
say.
a
And
sauna.
because I have to say,
Mm,
I was already regularly sauning through my whole perimenopause, and that was definitely not one of my issues. I didn't,
mm.
sure, I had some other issues, but vasomotor symptoms was not one of them. So I didn't, hot flushes and sleep. So getting back to that sleep, again, what happens when we're going to sleep? How does sauna help with sleep? Because
Mm.
this is helping men and women. And again, when we're about to go to sleep, there have been studies that show that our hypothalamus, again, I keep coming back to that key organ, that key gland, it puts settings that actually reduce our body temperature, cool us for a full, by a full degree, before, in that first kind of half hour to an hour, to let you get to sleep. And that's the whole theory behind using the cold suits, or it's very popular to try and help that, and ease that along. And I think that's what's happening in the sauna, because the hypothalamus driven mechanisms that help us cool us to go sleep, they're the exact same ones that are getting activated when you come out of the sauna. So
Mm.
it's that timing of coming out of the sauna before you go to bed. And a lot of people have mentioned that they have to be careful about not going to the sauna too close to bedtime, because sometimes they're just so high that cooling, it takes a lot longer. So yeah,
Hmm.
so most people say try and complete your sauna at least 2 hours before going to bed to
Well,
get
that'd
that.
be
But
like exercise, really. I remember when I used to
exactly.
do a tennis comp that finished at 10 o'clock at night, I had no chance of getting to sleep before 12:30, 1 o'clock that morning, because I was just too, I was in battle. And in a sense, the sauna does demand of us a bit of a fight,
Yes.
like a bit of, something's changing here. We're creating some tension.
Well, here's another pathway to think about. Again, we're veering away from the sauna, but have you ever tried taking melatonin on those evenings when you can't wind
No.
down?
Mm-mm.
Well, that's what I use, because I often sometimes play tennis, or just on a night when you're out and you
Yeah.
can't do your normal wind down regime. And what I've been finding with people, as long as you don't take melatonin all the time, it's just
Mm.
as needed for those kind of situations. I find it just speed dials the cool process. And that's another theorized mechanism behind
Mm.
how does sauna maybe work. Maybe it changes the melatonin levels. Maybe it makes it easier to release it. Not clear yet. Now, there's some of the studies I've looked at haven't really showed it clear, but they haven't been done very well. And a lot of them were done with mist saunas, which again, I kind of go, there's that theory, in a mist sauna, we're not actually sweating. We're just increasing the body temperature. Could
Mm.
it be the sweating? And and sweating is just this totally understudied process that we spend a lot of time culturally trying to ignore and cover up,
Yeah,
like
I
we're
know.
embarrassed of it, especially as women, but really we
Well,
should
I
be.
find it's the men that tend to be more embarrassed. Like I've helped thousands of people switch to low tox products over the years. And in our chat groups and courses, there's always, my husband is paranoid. He's going to have like sweaty armpits in a meeting, or, they really do not want to make a switch just in case. They might actually have evidence of being a human being that sweats in public. And
Yeah.
it's a huge block for guys. Like you think of all those targeting ads, it's about stinking and sweating, 48-hour block, and, all these
Yeah.
crazy blocks to a natural process. It's,
Right. And in
yeah.
fact, it's a natural process that, look, we would die without sweating.
Mm,
Again, it's our major way of maintaining our body temperature. And
mm.
sometimes I've had friends who said, look, I just can't sauna with you. I don't sweat. And I just look at them and go, guess what? You are sweating even as you talk to me. You're doing this minute amount of sweating called physiological sweating, just again to moderate, to regulate your body temperature, to keep it constant. That's our mammalian, that's what we've inherited. That's our
Mm.
mammalian trait, is to maintain a constant body temperature.
And can I ask, Joy, in the case of like people with thyroid issues who tend to have more trouble sweating, one of the questions naturopaths ask, when they take you through all the questions, new patient, is, do you find that even through exercise you have trouble sweating? Can we talk about that in relation to sauna?
Sure, let's dive into that, because I'm gonna mention my favorite gland again, the
The
hypothalamus.
hypothalamus. Yeah, I'm with you now.
Because
I know that one.
thyroid, there is something called, so if, for anyone who has a thyroid condition, one of the things you have to look at is something called the HPA axis. And that's
Mm.
the hypothalamus, pituitary, adrenal axis. And the thyroid gland is highly intertwined with that, because what regulates our thyroid to turn on more or turn off more is a hormone called TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, and it comes from the pituitary gland. And guess what? There is a hypothalamus gland or hormone that's released from the hypothalamus that tells the pituitary how much TSH to release. So yes, by theory, I think there should be a way to regulate, to maybe impact. Now, whether it's positive or negative impact, I don't know. I haven't seen any studies on thyroid, but wow, what a great population of people to start to experiment with saunas. Because I think, let's see if maybe, increasing the hypothalamus use in thermoregulation, will that increase TSH or decrease TSH? When I've looked at endocrine studies studying the effects of sauna on different hormones, I haven't seen TSH be increased or decreased, but again, it hasn't been studied that much. There's
Mm.
only a handful of studies.
And that's bizarre to me, given the hypothalamus pituitary TSH lineage, right? That just makes no
Well,
sense that we wouldn't have jumped on that pretty quickly
I
as soon as we
know.
recognize the hypothalamus's changes in sauna.
Yes, well, certainly too, conditions where the immune system is, so
Mm,
something like Hashimoto's thyroiditis, where, it's our leading autoimmune condition, especially in women. That's where I think, wow, there could be a double, we could be feeding two birds with the same crumb, looking at heat, because that's one of the theories behind sauna, is that it definitely is an immune activator.
mm,
It definitely increases in this activation of this thermoregulation. You get a lot of cytokines that get released, something like cortisol, no question of it. Cortisol levels go up. Now, typically we think of that as the stress hormone, and always think of it, well, we often talk about it for its negative effects, but look, cortisol's what wakes us up in the morning. So,
exactly.
it's,
Hello. Kind of
and
need it. Yeah.
all these hormones are double-edged swords. It's
Mm,
all about balance. So
mm,
yes, could that? I think that sounds like a great hypothesis that needs to be tested around thyroid and immunity too. And
mm,
definitely there are some studies that have been done. Mostly I've seen them mostly in Korea and Japan, that have looked at effects on uh, conditions where the immune system's impact. So like chronic fatigue or chronic pain, which we know is, that has to do with nerve and immune crosstalk. And no question of it, there is benefits that have been demonstrated, but curiously, these populations needed gentler saunas. Going back to that, so what do I mean by a gentler sauna? What is a low intensity sauna? An example of that would be something like an infrared sauna.
mm,
That's where the temperature is dialed right down. But that's not to say you can't take like a Finnish style sauna and turn that temperature down. It's just It's just the cultural overlay on the uses of these types of sauna that have determined that. Now, you have to be careful with infrared saunas because the way the technology works, the way the heat is generated, it is more difficult to get super high levels.
Mm.
So most of when I see an infrared sauna operate, it's usually between 40 and 60 degrees Celsius, whereas most of the cultural use of Finnish style, Russian style, banya, or the others, they tend to be kind of 75, 80 degrees to 90 degrees or over
Wow.
Celsius, especially, and that's where they sometimes mix in humidity too. So
Uh-huh.
when you think of a traditional Finnish style, you're pouring that water
Mm.
intermittently over the sauna rocks, and that creates that big steam effect, which I can't pronounce the Finnish way, loyally I call it, but someone will pronounce it much better than I do. But what is that doing? That's temporarily stopping your sweating and letting you surge up. And then as it dissipates, as that moisture in the air dissipates, then you're getting back to sweating and evaporating. So that's what's, I think, unique about kind of the Finnish style sauna
Mm.
is you are actually practicing what we call in science community contrast therapy, because
Yeah, I was going to say, because I can't handle the ones that are humid all the time. That just makes me feel like I have to get out of there. Recovering mold illness person. And so humidity is literally my Achilles heel to begin with, just in regular seasonal change. So I would never willingly expose myself to 90%
a lot
humidity
of
for half an
women
hour.
feel that way.
But I
Yes.
think if you got reprieve, as you're describing in the Finnish system, that I reckon I could handle. I think it'd be almost a therapeutic readaptation, probably, because it's your body saying, it's
Yeah.
okay, humidity is not going to kill you all the time. Like, look, you made
Yeah.
it.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah. So these are all things to work towards. And that's one of I'm actually working on a book right now trying to help people find their sauna place. I'm calling it the
Mm.
sauna playbook. I may change it. I may change that title, but all of us, based on our genetics, what you were talking about, which we don't know a lot, although I do feel like if you grew up in a place where you saunaed regularly, you already probably have certain probably genetic tendencies to deal with it differently than, say, someone like myself that grew up without it. It took me a long time to work up to contrast therapy. In fact,
Hmm.
probably years, probably 7 or 8 years of regular sauna bathing before I could really enjoy a cold plunge or a cold shower.
Mm.
And I think it's like, again, coming back to that allegory with exercise. You can't run that marathon. Most of us can't run a marathon the first time we do it. You need
Mm.
to train, you need to work up to it. And I think it's the same way with saunas. And depending on what you want out of the sauna, that's gonna determine what kind of training protocol you want to do. And a lot of us sauna researchers are talking about trying to standardize sauna protocols in our studies and stuff, but I actually think that's not the way to go. I think we need to let people practice their own different protocols to actually look at especially the long-term effects of saunas. So I'm
Mm.
very interested in the long-term use of it. And in fact, when we were talking about perimenopause and stuff like that, I don't think it's the effect of one sauna that makes the huge difference. And I even think with sleep, it was not the effect of one sauna. I think it's actually the effect of long-term, again, like exercise. You
Yeah.
know,
You're
you
building up a fitness routine of sauna.
Right. And in
Mm.
fact, someone else that I was talking with about this didn't like my term sauna fitness, said, "Ah, it didn't sound right," and came up with thermal flexibility. And actually, I've converted over. I like thermal
I like
flexibility.
that too. Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
great expression. And so can I ask a question? No, I feel like we want to come back first to where does
Mhm.
someone start to explore, like especially if someone is more sensitive or maybe they have a health condition, and they're concerned around safety. What is the best way for that person to start exploring sauna options?
Well, I think low intensity sauna, whether that be, so it tends to be a dry sauna, so that can
Hmm.
be an infrared sauna or a more traditional electric sauna that's just set low.
Mm.
So we're looking at start at, say, 40, 50, 60. Now, some people argue, wait a minute, I live in Alice Springs, it's a sauna all the time. And it's like, no, that's where you would start at a little higher. You're trying to activate these symptoms. So if I lived in Alice Springs and I had a sauna, which I look back 10 years ago or 15 years ago and wish I had, I would have set the sauna at maybe 60 degrees at least to start with. And then, because when you walk out of a 60 or 70 or 80 into, say, 40 or 50, guess what? It still feels refreshing. It's
Yeah,
still,
I bet.
so, and the same way that, that big drop when you're rolling in snow or going into an ice, into an ice hole, those are huge. That's much more of a stress on the system. And there's been some nice studies in Poland that have actually demonstrated that. They've actually, again, they've done men and women now, but when they directly compared a steam sauna with a dry sauna, there's no question of it. The actual heart rate responses, blood pressure responses, and core temperature responses were all much more with the steam sauna, comparing time to time compared to the dry sauna. So again, there's research evidence to demonstrate it is higher intensity. So for someone with any type of immune condition or the elderly, someone who's older who's like, I don't know about starting this kind of thing, go gentle, go low intensity. So just even 40, just at least 10 degrees above what you live in. If you live in the tropics or something. The other thing is with the tropics, you're coming out and you can't sweat, that humidity.
Yeah.
Whereas in a sauna, especially a dry sauna, you're sweating. So you're getting that system working in a way. And that itself can be quite refreshing to come out of.
Absolutely.
So.
And when you were mentioning before how the studies showed it was not just one night's sleep that people felt a positive effect, but it was two, even onto the second night. Does that mean we should be saunaing every 3 days for a lasting benefit, or does it accumulate and you can kind of go once a week after a while? What are we talking about?
Great question, and don't know the answer to that yet.
We
But
need more research. I feel like we are literally putting on a show that is tabling research opportunities for sauna.
definitely, and that is my whole journey right now. But something you just said was interesting. So we tend to think multiple times a week because that's what us scientists have studied. But in my own journey, remember what I said? I said it was within 2 weeks of having a sauna. And that meant, and that's something I've worked out over these last 20 years is I just need to get in the sauna at least once every 2 weeks. That's not that often, a couple times a month.
Yeah, because I
And
was thinking about privilege and cost. And,
yes,
if as soon as we're saying every 3 days, it's like, what, I'm going to be spending $400 a month on sauna treatments now in my little
exactly.
apartment where I can't buy one. Or, there's a lot of privilege in health that I'm always really conscious of. And what is our minimum required to see a benefit? Well, once every 2 weeks, that makes it much more accessible for a lot of people.
Yes. And in fact, who knows what the answer to that question? Maybe it's once every 3 weeks. This is what I've worked out for my Raynaud system. But remember, I'm unique and a unique individual, and even Raynaud syndrome. I'm sure that someone else's Raynaud syndrome has slightly different mechanisms involved than my Raynaud syndrome. And that's what I think medicine is really, this whole push towards, we're going through a revolution. This whole idea of studying groups of people and then generalizing our results from groups of people, even if we're talking thousands. Yes, we increase our chances of making sure that more individuals share something, but we're especially with the microbiome, you introduce the microbiome, all our different microbiomes, and suddenly we have all these degrees of freedom that we can't control anymore. So I really think we've got, and medicine is doing this. I mean, I can see the future of medicine in very close. I mean, sooner than any of us are ready for. We're going to be having a thumb driver. Who knows? It's going to be implanted as our genetics, our genetic blueprint is going to be combined into the AI before we're actually even seen by a doctor. And then the doctor is going to this is my view of the future, is then going to have these tools that are generated towards your genetics, and then it's going to be applied to your epigenetics, you know? So I think every person is going to get super, super personalized medicine very soon. We're getting the
Mm.
tools to do that more and more, which is kind of interesting that here I am promoting and studying something that is the opposite. It's like looking at looking at a tool that I think can help everyone, but it just needs to be applied differently depending on what
And I
someone's
think
been through.
intuition is really important as well. Like, how did it make you feel? Do we need to step back a little bit? Are you
Exactly.
someone who actually really thrives doing it regularly?
Right.
It's going to be different for everyone, and
Yes.
different times of life and different times of cycle, as we come back to,
Yeah,
right?
and
So,
different types of fitness,
mm,
exercise fitness as well. So there is quite a body of literature, as we mentioned before, in the exercise fitness. Sports science has probably done the most studies on
yeah.
sauna. And there they're using it for athletes for recovery.
Mm.
So recovering from muscle soreness, recovering getting acclimated if they have to compete in a hotter place. And so that's where so that needs to be put into there too, because someone who is very fit, I find, can slide along that sauna thermal flexibility much quicker, because in a way they've been using their thermoregulatory system, maybe not to the extent that they do in a sauna, but they've already been using it regularly. So
Mm.
they're already higher on that scale of what they can tolerate, I think.
Absolutely. And then from a preventative perspective, I think we often like employ things for a crisis measure or for a healing measure or for a, but from the preventative perspective, I'm hearing the benefit is don't wait until something goes wrong. Build up your thermal flexibility now, and it might actually prevent things from going wrong.
Yes, well, that's where certainly the big studies that come out of Finland,
Mm.
Jari Laakkonen is a cardiologist who's done the most wonderful large scale. We're looking at following over 2,000 men, women over 20 and 25 years or longer. So these are
Wow.
long term, no question. Those that more frequently sauna, but frequently they found the sweet spot looking at cardiovascular benefits. So looking at how many heart attacks people had, how many strokes they had, whether they got dementia or not. So those are the kind of cardiovascular.
Mm.
And what they found the sweet spot was 3 to 4 times a week. That's for
Wow.
cardiovascular. And look, my Raynaud's is a cardiovascular phenomenon too. And again, I haven't found that I need 3 to 4. To me, it was only every 2 weeks, but
Mm.
that's where we're all a bit different. But yeah, that's the sweet spot that they found looking at this Nordic. So maybe this is Finland, and maybe the more you do it, maybe you need to do it more often. We
Mm.
always assume that maybe they would have to do it less often, but maybe not. Maybe us that aren't exposed to sauna can get benefit from not as frequently. We don't know.
True. And could it actually be that the cooler the climate you live in, the more the frequency matters?
Maybe. That's a great,
Mm.
again, so many lovely ideas that
Who are the
just need
PhD
to.
people out there who want to take these studies on? I think it would be, I mean, it's just so many people benefit from saunas. There's no question. Like just chatting to people who have one in their home or who have a membership and they go once or twice a week, like they really, you get to this place where you have people who say, I wouldn't be without it. Like I wouldn't now switch to a life where sauna wasn't in there anymore. So
You're
it's
talking to the converted.
obviously super helpful.
I run a small integrative medicine clinic, and sauna protocols is one of the things that if there's anything that I think could benefit, I'm popping people into it or giving them at least the idea to explore it.
Mm.
And one of the things that just recently I had a patient say that it helped her that wasn't on my radar was restless leg syndrome. I was really
Mhm.
surprised. She said, we were actually trying to use the sauna for something else. But she actually mentioned, one thing I've noticed, and this was just doing a sauna once a week. is that my
Wow.
restless leg syndromes is gone. And again, this is where in medicine we tend to silo conditions. So restless leg syndrome tends to get siloed in neurological, things that have to do with the brain. Whereas actually restless leg syndromes is also, it's involved in circulation is
Yeah,
involved with that.
absolutely.
So I actually think that made me scratch my head and go, oh, wow. So maybe restless leg syndrome, maybe the problem is more a cardiovascular. Maybe it's something to do with that lining of our blood vessels, which is where
And the
we think
electrical
this,
system in the body.
yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
And this is, and we haven't even talked about, well, what are the biochemical mechanisms that explain how sauna works? And there are many different things. Probably one of the sexiest things talked about is heat shock proteins, but heat shock proteins is just one of probably 500 or so different biochemical phenomena happening. I mean, my feeling is nitric oxide, I think, which is it's actually a free radical of all things, but like anything, it's about balance. But I actually think this nitric oxide that's in our blood vessels that we need to make them, it's one of the messengers that opens and closes. And I actually think the bioavailability of nitric oxide is probably playing a key role. And that's at least what the cardiologists have worked out. And then that's made me think, well, maybe that's something with restless leg syndromes too.
Hmm.
And there's all these connections, and this is very symbolic of sauna studies too, is that they're all done in these different silos and disciplines that don't always talk to each other.
Yeah.
So it turns out when you look at premenopausal and postmenopausal women, there is a difference in nitric oxide bioavailability. So
Wow.
perhaps could that be what sauna's doing to make that transition better? Who knows?
Mm.
There's so much we don't know.
Oh
Um,
my gosh. And yet there's so much we have learnt in talking to you. Can you share a couple of other things that happen in sauna? You mentioned 500. You surely have a couple of favorites that when you started to research it, you were like, what?
well, definitely the whole hypothalamus mediated.
Mm,
I think cortisol is part of that HPA axis. I think considering cortisol is what wakes us up in the morning, it wouldn't
mm.
surprise me if maybe doing something with cortisol helps us go to sleep too. That's just one of my theories. Um,
Yeah. So on that, Joy, has any research been done or have you discovered anything that talks about time of day benefit in terms of like if you want to do your sauna in the morning, if you have low cortisol, that's a really good time for you to just kind of kickstart the engine.
Fascinating question. And look, it's all anecdotal at this point. And in fact, I'm even guilty when I did my clinical trial with women for timing purposes of the place that I was using. I did it always in the morning
Mm,
when really what I was talking about, how it could help sleep, is doing it
yeah.
in the evening. So to answer your question, no, there hasn't been good looking at timing, but I suspect it's powerful. And I do notice that the patients that gravitate towards doing it in the mornings are doing it more for the cognitive, the kind of antidepressant. Haven't even touched on depression yet, but
Wow.
there are definitely some strong studies starting to show that those that suffer from mild depression, something's going on with their thermoregulation. There's a great study out of UCSF just a few years ago that looked at a big population of people wearing wearables.
Mm-hmm.
And they had to fill out questionnaires about how their depression symptoms. Those with higher depression symptoms were correlated with having higher core body temperatures based on their wearables. So there's no question something's going on. And in fact, there's a few researchers too. There's someone out of Wisconsin too, Dr. Raisin, Chuck Raisin. He's also been looking at using infrared to help with mild depression. And again, finding out how much to do it, what time of day to do it. Most of the time of day in a lot of the studies is based on the convenience of the researchers, not its effects, or not that I've seen yet. I
Mm.
haven't seen enough, but Like I
I
was
feel like
just
we're going to
saying,
have some juicy conversations in our membership, and I'm going to share with you what
I would
people
love it.
say.
I would love
Might
it.
even make a little survey so that all our listeners who do sauna talk about whether they've noticed there's a time of day that they benefit
Yes.
better, and a few other questions. Because I think, given we answer as many questions as we ask, it's one of those topics, right? When the research just isn't giving us enough definitives yet. That would
And
just
you
be
are so
so
right.
great to get
And
some
with
more.
sauna,
Mm.
many more questions than answers that we've got.
Mm-hmm.
No, you're so correct about that.
And so, what would be if you could just be dumped with like $20 million to study sauna, and like, what are your priorities? What would you love to be able to answer the questions to the most?
Well, my strongest interest is in women.
Mm.
So no question of it. I'm working on what's this trial that's called Perspire right now, using perimenopausal sauna to improve responses to estrogen changes. So that's
Mm-hmm.
where the Perspire comes from. So that would definitely, I would want to put at least 2 million into that. The
Yeah.
first off.
You never know who's listening, Joy. So
Yeah,
let's do it.
but also on that same theme of, how is sauna improving? Well, it's hypothalamus. And I think the trouble with hot flushes is they interfere with sleep so much. So
Mm.
to study particularly sleep outcomes, sleep parameters with sauna, that would be number two for sure. Again, focusing on women, and then sticking on that theme of women, looking at the times of cycle. Let's
Mm.
do sauna in the same women, a huge number of women, and let's see. And again, I'm into wearables. I think
Yeah, me
wearables
too.
can
Mm.
tell us a lot. So I would love to use wearables. But actually, this is a good precautionary tale about wearables. Be careful about wearing them in the sauna, because
Oh,
they
okay.
mess with a lot of the electronics. Anything electronic is kind of tough. I mean, that's why
Mm.
when you see the infrared saunas with the speakers, it's all Bluetooth, because you got to be careful of electric wires and heat. They just don't
Mm-hmm.
mix very well. But getting back to my wish list. So yes, it would be really focusing on hormones and sleep, I
Mm.
think, and immune conditions. I think the immune system. And then the other one that I would like to do is microbiome analysis. I think
Mm.
regular sauna going, I can't help but think it's changing our gut microbiome, that whole ratio of all those trillions of microbes, but also our skin microbiome. And we don't tend to focus a lot on our skin microbiome because it's hard. There's a lot of our skin, and guess what? The when we've done studies, which it's just starting to get done, the population of bacteria, the ratios are different in different parts of our body, depending on it, a skin fold versus covered versus uncovered. So the skin microbiome is so much more difficult to study, but it's like women and their hormones. It's
Mm.
difficult to study too, but that's where I think the secret sauce might be. I actually think saunas could probably be more therapeutic for women than men in general,
Mm.
but we just don't have the studies yet to demonstrate that.
Well, let's see if we can get the low tox community to give us some indicators on that. Especially, we have a lot of people in perimenopause in our community. So I think it'd be
Oh,
fascinating to see if you're
well,
saunaing, we want to know about it. How's it
yes,
helping?
and this
Mm.
and this Perspire trial I want to do, I want to make it a citizen science trial. So meaning you don't have to live where I'm living in Brisbane. I
Mm.
want to be able to capture preferably Australia, all of Australia, and get people to share their wearable data while doing a particular sauna protocol that suits them, not a protocol that suits me as a researcher. Because
Mm-hmm.
I
So can
suspect.
I clarify then? Because you just mentioned wearing their wearable, but then we should be concerned about using the wearable in the sauna. So what do you, how do
Well,
we?
my interest is in the long-term effects of sauna. So
Okay, so it's
there is,
more like how did you sleep that night? So you could still not wear
right,
it inside the
right.
sauna, but it's about what's happening to
It's
your core
about,
body temperature, your sleep, your
yes,
HRV. Okay, got
right.
it.
And
Mm.
having said that, look, it's not that, so I have an Aura ring too. It's not that it won't, I've worn it in the sauna before. It's just when I've noticed people who wear it regularly, it just wears out quicker. And so
Okay,
to
got it.
me, But I'm looking at more the bigger picture of what
Yeah.
sauna can do. And my focus is slow medicine. So it's looking at integrative lifestyle medicine. So I'm looking at these slow changes. There's lots of studies that are showing the acute changes that happen with sauna, but that's not where I think the big health benefits are. They're in that regular use, like what Yari Lockinen, the cardiologist, was looking at. We're looking at these big questions. What, longevity, what kills us? What impacts our life so much? Those are the kind of things I want to see if sauna can improve. So that's what I meant by that.
That's exciting. And my last question is, if someone's out there, they're now very excited about trying sauna, and you can do the ones, like a lot of the gym ones have the hot stones. You could go to Korean bathhouse. You could go to an infrared sauna at a beauty spa or another gym offering. I mean, there's so many different options. Is there better or worse, or is it now a journey to discover which sauna you prefer and why and how it makes you feel? Like, should we go into it intuitively rather than this strict idea of one being better than the other?
I think the answer is just very complicated. We haven't even talked about the precautions around sauna bathing, maybe who shouldn't sauna bathe. I'm not saying sauna is for everyone. In fact, anyone who has big fluctuations in their blood pressure, probably sauna is not what you should be exploring until you have a more solid, because your blood pressure drops after being in it increases while you're in the sauna, but it decreases when you come out of it. And definitely falls and burns, like falling in the sauna and suffering a burn, those are some of the problems that can happen with sauna. The other thing is that we often forget is skin. You need your skin to be intact to sweat well. If you've been in the sun, if you have a sunburn, or if you're getting a skin treatment, or you have a terrible case of eczema, I'm not sure you should be getting into the sauna. That can really impact your hydration. And then talking about the precautions of how to get the most out of the sauna, you have to be well hydrated. Remember, I said sweat is composed of 99+% water. If you don't have the water in that sweat gland to produce, guess what? You're not going to be sweating. So
you get dehydrated and you don't sweat. Yeah.
And in fact, when I tease out adverse effects of the sauna, which tend to be from the Global Sauna Survey, things like headaches, things like, it was headache was probably the most, and dizziness were the most. Well, those are both blood pressure hydration related. So it made me think, how hydrated were these people? So a lot of the adverse effects, I wonder, are due to poor hydration. And in fact, just in my clinic, talking to all my patients, most of us are running around hypohydrated. We're not hydrated enough. And that's where I think electrolytes, we haven't even had time to get into what's in sweat, which is like
oh my
whole
gosh.
other
No, you can share it if you don't have to go anywhere, Joy. We would love to know.
Yeah, no, sweat is such a fascinating fluid. I mean, right now with newer analysis that's available in the laboratory, something called metabolomics, where instead of just looking for a particular, seeking, kind of like fishing, you're trying to catch a fish. Well, now we have this with magnetic, with different types of magnetic resonance type detection. We can actually see everything, every molecule that's in a fluid.
Wow.
And metabolomics, what you're finding is we don't know what all of these things are. We give them each numbers, but there's so much in sweat. And one of my clinical trials, again, where I was looking at women, bicycling versus in the sauna versus just meditating, I took sweat samples in all those three things, and there were some differences in women in their sweat content. And I was looking at pesticides, insecticides. I was looking at synthetic pyrethroids and organophosphates, and just looking at the different ratios of how much in that same person. So that same person's got, had same exposure, what they would have at different points. Doing these different activities makes me think sweat is like blood. It's changing all the time. It depends on your circumstances, your environment at the time. And That's not to mention that we don't reabsorb things from our sweat too. So
Mm.
all kinds, and electrolytes. That's the
So
other
is it
thing.
best to have a shower after you've saunaed so that you don't leave it sitting on your skin?
Oh, what a controversial question. I can't, you ask all these questions and I wish I had a good answer for you. And in fact, it's one we debate all the time. So like I have my neighbors and we sauna all together, usually about once a week or so. And we're always debating that. Should you take the shower after with soap, without soap? You know, there's all
Mm.
these, and everyone has their frame of mind, which is good. That's their frame, what works best for you. And I can say that before I used to do cold plunges, I would always shower because I was
Mm-hmm.
convinced, I was looking at it more from kind of the content, sweat content point of view. But I'd have to say, now that I've do some more cold therapy and I take cold showers in between my sessions, I actually don't do a full shower afterwards. So it just depends. And then when you look at, say, Northern Europeans and how they've, their cultural heritage around saunas, it actually started off as for hygiene. Is for cleaning. It was for bathing. That's why sauna bathing. Where does that come from? Well,
Mm.
that's what it started off as. Is that where it is now? No, it's full of all kinds of rich undertones now of why do we sauna. So no good answer to that. And that would be part of what I would discuss in trying to figure out how to sauna best for you.
Mm-hmm.
That's my interest, and that's what I'm trying to put together in my book, is give people a guide, give people some little exits to try when they're.
Yeah. But do you know what I love about everything you've shared, Joy, is this humility around and openness to not necessarily having the black and white answers. And there's the N equals 1 aspect of this that is probably the most important, which is for you to find what works for you under professional guidance if you're currently unwell, as you talked about, with blood pressure issues, making sure you're hydrated. So you have those basic safety understandings around sauna. But from there, the world is your oyster to just see how you go.
Well, you have a beautiful attitude. I'd have to say it frustrates some of my patients because
Mm.
many of us, we want a quick fix, especially when we're
Well,
not
I'm
feeling
trying to get
well.
everyone out of this black and white world. It's gotten us, and then I think leaderships around the world then try to just keep pitting us against each other. Science keeps trying to like create us and them and you and me and
I
anti and
know.
pro and for and against. And it's just
Well,
so futile to actually discovering really robust science, which comes from full exposure, transparency, and endless debate to keep it
yes.
moving in a truer direction. You can't actually arrive. We never will. So let's relax and just keep learning.
I am so in agreement with you. And that's been one of the frustrating parts of my medical career, is that
I can imagine.
we're taught to look at it, that we know the answers, and we're not taught to discuss uncertainty. And in fact, there's not a lot of language in our medical training to discuss uncertainty. It's all about being sure and
Mm,
demonstrating that confidence to people, when really, I think there's so much more that we don't know. And our bodies are so awesome. Oh my gosh, the things going on, and it's always so much more complex than what we can pin down. So
mm,
I'm totally aligned with your approach. I think all of us need to have that medical approach that takes into consideration the most variables you can, not the least.
mm.
So
100% Joy. Thank you so much for joining us on the show. I've really enjoyed our
uh,
conversation and all the wealth of insights that you've shared to help people who are either sauna curious or already sauna sold. Maybe now explore it from a more intuitive lens and see times of day, times of month, and really start tuning in, like keeping a sauna diary. That's what I'm feeling from what you're saying.
boy. Well,
Mm,
just a body diary. That's something
mm,
I do with my patients all the time. We put more time into keeping track of our money than we do into keeping track of our body.
mm.
No question of it. Sauna diaries, but just body diaries,
Yeah.
checking in. with
Yeah, and it
ourselves.
helps us be more confident in what we're feeling versus the answers that are all out there confusing us all the time.
Yes, yes. Well, hey, it's been an absolute pleasure. You've asked some real juicy of questions that I love that have inspired me. I've got to think about them a little bit more now.
I'm excited. Thank you so much, Joy. And I can't wait to hear what the community has to say about their sauna experiences.
Well, please share with me. I'd love that.
Oh, that you can bet I will.
Okay, sounds good.
I hope you loved today's show as much as I loved bringing it to you. I want to remind you that if you are someone who craves a low tox community that is judgment-free, full of empowerment, has health professionals and building health professionals that can support you, as well as me in there answering questions multiple times a week, I want to invite you to join the Low Tox Club. For the price of less than a cup of coffee a month, you have an annual membership for $49 Australian, so it's about $30 US or euro, that allows you to have a member masterclass every single month with a health professional or global expert from the podcast, where we have them to ourselves for an hour to ask questions and deep dive further. You have the beautiful supportive chat group. You have Q&As with me answering questions. We read books and talk about them, and a whole bunch more. You can head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the explore tab, and join the club is the very first option on that list. Of course, we have over 10 evergreen courses that you can jump into anytime, whether it's navigating everyday low tox swaps with our Go Low Tox signature course, whether you have kids and you're wanting to know how to best support them with our Low Tox Kids course, whether you're planning a family and looking at a healthy low tox preconception journey, reducing inflammation, especially the chronic kind, with our Inflammation Ninja course, many other courses. You can again head to lowtoxlife.com, hit the courses tab, and you'll see all of the options, which includes a business course, my Low Tox Method program. A lot of people don't know, but I was doing a lot before starting Low Tox Life in 2009, and I was a business consultant across hospitality, health, retail, and cosmetics. I have been in business consulting for a very long time, so I absolutely adore helping people move into the low tox space or develop their low tox businesses. So that's a way I can support you. And then, of course, there's our wonderful social media communities at Low Tox Life on Instagram, and of course, the website with over 250 gluten-free recipes, blogs, downloadable PDFs to help you navigate wanting to get rid of synthetic fragrances in your school or office. I could go on. So head to lowtoxlife.com, see what takes your interest or fancy, and thank you so much for being a part of our podcast community. I love reading your reviews. I appreciate every follow and subscribe, and I want to just remind you to finish off that if there's anything you heard that you found interesting from a medical or scientific perspective, it is intended as education only. Please always chat to a health professional who knows you and your situation best. I'll see you next week. Bye.